Life Management Science Labs would like to acknowledge that we live and produce this podcast on the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri people. We'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands of our listeners and our international colleagues. We'd like to pay our respects to their elders past, present, and emerging. Hello everyone, and welcome to Wealth Pathways, the Affluence Science Insights Podcast produced by LMSL, the Life Management Science Labs. We are champions of life management science, providing structured insights informed by science and inspired by practice on key aspects of conscious living. Each week, we bring you scientific and practical insights on each element with the expert knowledge of professionals in the field. I'm your host, Marie Stella, coming to your ears from Nam, Melbourne, Australia. Let's learn together.
Hello and welcome back to the show. In poker, every hand is a lesson in risk, reward, reading people, and knowing when to concede. Today, we'll be exploring what poker can teach us about decision-making, because in the game of life and wealth, it's not always about having the best cards, it's about using them wisely. And joining us in this conversation is Professor Marvin Karlins, who teaches principles of management and organizational behavior at the University of South Florida. His research interests range from psychology of gambling to leadership, motivation, and interpersonal effectiveness. So we're really thrilled to have him here with us today. Welcome to the show, Marv.
Thanks. Been looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's great to have you here. But before we begin, do tell us about your background and what compelled you to pursue organizational behavior. What compelled you to, look into psychology of gambling as well?
Well, when I was a young kid, I tried to figure myself out and couldn't do it. So I decided I'd major in psychology. Maybe they'd be able to tell me. And as I experienced more information about psychology, I realized that was really critical for everybody was what I call interpersonal effectiveness. In other words, to be able to deal with other people in a successful manner so that the other person walks away feeling that they've achieved what they wanted or got what they wanted. And so organizational behavior is involved with people at work. So in the organizational area, what I strive to do was to make the workplace what I call a worth place, WORTH. In other words, seeing how the organization could help people not only enjoy their work, but to achieve a sense of passion and satisfaction, even self-actualization from the jobs that they're doing. Even rote jobs, jobs that are not that interesting. They're repetitive. If you have a good manager or a good leader, they can really spice up the workday and make things better. And with good colleagues, even the worst work can be good. As a matter of fact, I remember the very first time I had some consulting work, they gave me a topic of motivation for septic tank workers. Now, these are people that come out and they clean out these big septic tanks. I figured out how could that be enjoyable work? Well, I watched 16 different groups, and the one group that was really happy was one where all the guys joked around, had a good time. And I went up to the manager afterwards and I said, I've seen 16 groups and only your group ends the day with a smile on their face. And he said, well, I'll tell you the secret. It always smells the same. It's not a pleasant job. But if you can concentrate on the enjoyment of working together, somehow it kind of just it goes away, and you can enjoy the interaction with the people. And if you can do that working with septic tanks, I mean, I think you can do it with anything.
Yeah, I found that to be the experience myself in, past working experiences, past jobs, where your community is something that makes or breaks the experience for you. But with regards to poker, a lot of people see poker as arbitrary gambling, while others see it as a strategy. So in your view, what is the key difference between the two and why does it matter?
Okay. Well, first of all, let's start out by realizing that the word gambling, we all gamble. Well, I mean, every time you make a decision, you're weighing risks. For instance, do I fly to New York or do I drive? Do I have an affair or do I not? Do I get married or shouldn't I? Do we want children or not? Are we going to get this kind of bread or are we going to get rolls? I mean, any one of those items is a gamble. You're trying to maximize benefits, what we call EV or expected value. So poker is gambling in the sense when you're talking about a specific kind of gambling. And we have two really kinds of gambling in the world of game of what we call gaming. They call it gaming now. We have casino gaming where the casino has an edge in every game. And over the long run, there's no way you can beat that game. And then you have certain games like poker where the casino is just collecting a toll, if you will. They're getting a certain amount of money from each player, but it's the player against the other player. So if you're better than the other players, you can overcome that cost of the casino, which is charging, and you can overcome having to pay tips out, um, and you can come out a winner. But you have to have the proper skill set, the kind of motivation, the passion for the game, and luck at the right time.
Yeah, luck at the right time. Okay, that's really interesting. I would love to know more about what it means to, have to employ strategies uh, when playing poker and what we can learn from it. But before we get into that, I would love to get to know you a little bit better, if that's okay. This is Have
Sure.
You Met Marvin? My first question for you is, what is your favorite book?
There's a series called Reacher, Jack Reacher. As a matter of fact, they made a movie and a TV series. I've read all his books by Lee Childs. Now, I think he's got his brother writing some of them now, but there's about 18, 19 of his books. I really enjoy them. It's the story of a man who left the army and wanders around with just a toothbrush and a credit card. A real sense of individual freedom.
Yeah, I recently went to Vietnam and saw the tunnels where all the soldiers had to hide in during the Vietnam War, and it really just made me think a lot about what they had to go through. So, like, yeah, it's really impressive how little we can really survive with, and how they've managed to, I guess, create a sense of camaraderie and uplifting emotions despite all that's going on. So yeah, that sounds like a really interesting series. And what about movies? Have there been anything that you're enjoying recently?
One movie that I'd recommend that every listener, if they haven't seen it, uh, I think they'd really enjoy it. I know that I mean in America, football is our national sport, but the relevance of the movie, it's called Rudy, Rudy. It's the story of a young man who goes to Notre Dame under circumstances he should have never gotten in there, but he did, and he wanted to play football, but he was like 150 pounds, and he should be 220, and the story is of his intense drive, his passion, his motivation, his willingness to suffer to get to an objective. He wanted to get on the field and play for Notre Dame. And the amount of, I mean, the amount of things that he had to go through to reach that objective is almost overwhelming. But it tells the audience that, be the best you can be, not necessarily the best there is. He wasn't the best player on the team, but he got on the field and he went as far as he could go with what he had. He left it all out there, and it's just a beautiful story of overcoming odds. And I used to show it in my classes. And I cry at the end of every time. It's really quite a moving experience to see that.
Yeah, I love that so much. It seems like there's a little bit of pattern going on here of like liking the stories where, you're like living for the hope of it, or pulling yourself out there just in hopes of living that life that you want. And what about podcasts?
I've done a few podcasts, but mostly on poker.
Hmm. Yeah, tell us more about that. What kind of poker podcasts are there out there at the moment?
Well, we'll cover that in ours actually. So there's a
Yeah.
lot. But the
Yeah, good point. Why not save it for later in the podcast?
yeah, I
You
saved the
have
best stuff for you guys.
Yeah, thank you. We love your Marv. And what about role models? Are there anyone that you've looked up to either in your professional or personal life?
My parents have been a tremendous guidepost for me. I grew up in the 50s, supposedly the golden years of the USA. And my father worked, my mother stayed home until I got to school age. My sister was, at that time, it was called mental retardation. Now it's called exceptional children. But so we dealt with her. My parents were able to go through all the trials and tribulations of life, raise us and give us a really good, solid background in what I consider to be appropriate ethical behavior.
Oh, that's really sweet. Thank you so much for sharing that. My last question for you is: has there been a course or class that you've taken that has stuck with you to this day?
Yes, one. I was in my high school years, I had to take algebra, but that's inappropriate. Algebra took me. I couldn't do it. I really couldn't do it. I mean, I failed at it. I really tried and I just couldn't do it. And that course taught me a lesson. And that is that no matter how good you are, there's always going to be an area where you're going to fail. And instead of sitting there griping and trying to get better at it and giving yourself a lot of bad press, go to somewhere where you can succeed. I mean, a river that's dammed will find another pathway. So I realized I was never going to be a mathematician. I probably wasn't going to be a doctor or a lawyer. I was going to have to go into an area where this kind of thinking was not necessary. And it's interesting that one of my main professions has been creative writing, which is kind of like, to me, it's just the exact opposite of the mathematics.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, it really is. I kind of had a similar but almost opposite experience where like I initially failed algebra for 2 years straight. Horrible, like just straight F's. And then I got a really good tutor who knew how to break it down to simple steps instead of just like I guess like kind of insulting you for not getting simple algebra, and it really changed my my entire perspective of it, and I loved algebra from then, and it was just straight A's from there. So mine is probably like, a good teacher can set you up really really right and nice.
can you get me his name, please?
Well, I'll email you their contact afterwards. But thank you for sharing more about yourself. That was such a pleasure, and I hope you enjoyed it as well.
Yes, very much.
Yeah, all right. Well, now let's jump into what poker can teach us about decision making. And before we really get into that, we would love to know how you would define affluence.
Okay. Affluence to me is a person who has enough money so that they know they can live the rest of their lives having whatever they want and never have to worry about money again. That's affluence. It's now again, different people have different standards of what they're satisfied with. I mean, we can give you statistical statements like if you make $150,000 a year US, you're in the upper X number percent of the population, and that they call that affluence. But I don't define it that way because it's what a person wants. I mean, I know, like for instance, I went into a poker game and I went with a very rich man. He wanted to show me his game. I'm used to playing poker. We're talking about antes of $1, $3. The lowest value chip on the table was $25,000. And I said, how much do you tend to win or lose on a typical night here? He said, 500,000. It's a swing one way or the other. Now, again, for him, a $500,000, because you got to remember he was a billionaire. So that would be like me, maybe $10 to $15. So it's all relevant to somebody that puts down $10 on a bet. That might be more of their bankroll than somebody that puts down 100,000. So affluence is really personal. It's the ability of a person to feel that they don't have to worry about money anymore. That to me is the best way to look at it because money, although it won't buy happiness, uh, eliminates hassles. As a matter of fact, one of my friends has a term. He calls it "fu money." I don't want to use the words. Uh, say, in other words, I've got so much money. I don't care what you say. If you fire me on this job, I don't care. If you say you want me to do something, I don't have to. I got enough money. So again, that's another definition of it. But I have found that people who are truly affluent are people who don't even worry about money anymore because it's already taken care of. It's just like if I've eaten a big meal, I'm not going to be worried about if I'm hungry.
Yeah, for sure. And secondarily, how would you define gambling?
Okay, the first kind of gambling I already talked about earlier. That's something we always do when we're making choices. We're always assessing risk. We might not be doing it consciously, but uh, just when you're driving down the street and the light turns yellow or orange, you're look, should I go through it? I mean, some people look at it as an invitation, speed up. Other people say, no, I'm going to stop because the risk is too high. So that kind of gambling we're doing every day. Now, the gambling that we're talking about in this broadcast, okay, podcast, is the issue of what we would call normally casino style gambling, which includes craps and roulette and baccarat and also includes sports betting. It includes betting on human events and poker. Um, and as I said, the kind of gambling that is the gambling that I want to focus on is gambling where you can actually win in the long run. And as I say, casino games like blackjack, unless you count cards, roulette, baccarat, all the odds are against you mathematically. Even though I didn't pass algebra, I do understand that statistically, you are always fighting an edge mathematically that in the long run is going to pull a certain amount of money out of your pocket. It might be
Mhm.
1%, it might be 5%, depends on the game, but you're never going to win in the long run. In the short run, yeah, maybe, but not in the long run. Whereas with games like sports handicapping or poker, or if you count cards at blackjack, you can get away with it. Um, there, you actually have a positive EV, expected value. So there, you can actually say it's like a job. I'm actually making money at this, and there are actual professionals. Let me assure you that uh, poker is a lot like acting. People go into it like actresses and actors. They go out to Los Angeles. They got dreams. Most of them never make it. Same as poker. You get maybe 1 or 2% that actually could make it, but 98% are going to fail. So, one thing I would say to all the listeners, if you're interested in a poker career, realize that it's a hard way to make easy money.
Yeah, it does sound really, really hard. But how would you describe the relationship between gambling and affluence and real life as well?
It's normally it's inverse. In other words, the more you gamble, the less affluence you have, because most people lose. I mean, if you look at Las Vegas, if you look at the Las Vegas Strip, those hotels weren't built on winners. Okay, they were built on losers. I can remember many times I get a invitation from a casino, come in, we'll give you a free room. Meanwhile, I was paying for the hotel. Uh, so affluent people, if they are gambling addicts, that's one of the best ways to lose your affluence because you're going to get to that point where suddenly money is a concern. And that's why gambling has that dangerous edge because we know that addicted gamblers will do very bad things to get money, even when they don't have it, much as drug addicts will.
So what is the strategy behind a game like poker, and what does that have to do with leadership and management and high stakes decision making in life?
Okay, poker, the reason I love the game, it's a microcosm of life. Poker, especially the no limit hold'em poker, which I play, and which is the most popular game, at least in the United States. It's a game. First of all, it teaches you humility, and I think anybody that has humility has a big edge because they understand failure and success, and they realize there's sometimes a very thin line there. It also teaches you patience because in poker, uh, the big risk takers Yes, they might. They might. It's kind of like a meteorite. They flame out. They're bright for a moment and then they disappear. So it teaches you that there is some math involved, not algebra, where you have to make decisions based on, for instance, who you're playing against, if you know their history, how much money is involved on the bet versus how much is in the pot. Um, it's whether or not the bet is justified based on the odds you're getting and what's the probability of making your hand. In other words, hitting the card that you need. So all these things you're thinking of all at once. There's 10 or 15 things. As a matter of fact, people have talked about the importance of, they use just general card games, not just poker, for older people to ward off dementia and Alzheimer's because you're using your brain and it's a very important way to do it. Canasta, bridge, those are cards that can do it, but it's a very effective way to keep the mind active. And the other thing is, of course, in poker, um, they say it's a lot of people say that the actually it's a game of people using cards, meaning that part of the skill of poker is getting to know your opponents. And if you can do it at a card table when money is at risk, then you could probably do it in most interactions, whether it be in business or interpersonal, um, because you understand people. You have to understand them, otherwise you're not going to succeed.
Yeah, that's really true. I often hear poker players talking about reading tells. I also see this, frankly, when watching Criminal Minds. So, in the boardroom or business negotiation, what's the equivalent of that?
Well, actually, the a book that we wrote, Joe Navarro, FBI agent, and myself wrote a book called the "What Everybody Is Saying," and he's given speeches all over the world on this very topic because there are tells in the business room, on the sports field, everywhere. As a matter of fact, we there were places in tennis and in baseball where people spotted people doing certain things, like the way they held their glove, which telegraphed what kind of pitch they were going to deliver, or a tennis player where they were going to try to hit the ball. So what you're doing is you're looking for certain, when they say tells, certain behaviors, nonverbal, not talking, nonverbal behaviors to try to assess what a person is like or what they're going to do or how they think. As a matter of fact, some people say that 70% of communication is nonverbal. So these tells are critically important. And there's two kinds. One kind is generic to everybody. It's kind of like it's built into the system back in the early primitive times, when we were fighting the dinosaurs. So you have certain tells that happen when people are under stress, and you can see these things, unless the people have been trained not to show them. Then there's the second kind of tell, which is unique to each individual. Like, for instance, let's say that you were uh, dating, okay? And every time that you didn't like a guy, you started kind of brushing your hair a bit, okay? And when you liked a guy, you didn't. Well, if you were a guy and knew that, you didn't have to ask, and that might sound obvious, but it's amazing how many people do have these little personal ticks or characteristics, the way they lean back or lean in, the way the way they look, the way they smile. All these things can give you information if you know them well. The better you know somebody, the more you're going to pick up on what we call idiosyncratic tells that are unique to that individual.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like a lot of also just noticing behaviors and observing before the actual decision making comes into play. Do you have any advice for that?
Well, in the book, we go through it in a lot of details. First, let me give you an example in poker. Most people would not think of this as a tell. When people have a really good hand, okay, so they're looking at a really good hand, their feet tend to start bouncing up and down, you know, and you can see this because their shoulders are going up and down. Now, these people are not aware that their feet are going up and down. We call it happy feet. And you'll also see you'll see it like when people in soccer games or any kind of spectators, what happens when something happens? They raise their hands, they're real excited. That's the same kind of thing. It's a nonverbal tell that something has happened that they enjoy. And if you watch sports, you just if they pan to the audience. You don't have to. You can tell which fans are which team based on what happens if a team scores a touchdown or if somebody gets a goal, and you look at the fans. You'll tell by their behavior. Those are all nonverbal tells.
Now I'm really curious to know what my tells are.
Well, the longer I'd be with you, the more I could answer that.
Okay,
Again,
well,
it takes a certain amount of interpersonal interaction before these things become obvious. And some people have less tells than others.
yeah, okay. Yeah, that's really interesting. I've always wanted to know if there's like a person who doesn't have any tells. Is that possible at all?
Well, the expression, you heard the expression poker face?
Yep.
Okay, you have a poker face. That would be a person who is able to disguise their tells. In other words, they've learned to keep a straight face, if you will. There are people who are con men or women who have learned certain kinds of tells. There can be false tells. You can use tells to falsify information too. If I'm looking, for instance, if I know, for instance, that somebody has happy legs, and that means they got a good hand. Well, if that person knows that you know that, and they got a bad hand, they might do that to trick you. So you can have the reverse tells. It gets into some real, psychology of how that's working. But the
Yeah.
no, it is. I think most married couples, have you ever seen really effectively successful 15 to 20-year marriages, how the two people seem to just meld together. They seem to know what the other person's thinking. That's because they've had years of real, just a subtle expression. With my wife, man, I could just a tilt of the head. I know what that means. I don't, when I see a certain look, I know what that means. Now, when I first met her, no, of course I didn't. But over the years, I started to put together, yes, when she gets really angry, this happens before it. So it's kind of like an early warning system, like an early
Yeah.
radar.
Hmm. Yeah, that's so interesting. And with regards to the decision making that comes after, noticing all of these cues, all of these tells, what are the different aspects that go into decision making in poker, especially the ones that coincide with skills required for just real life?
Okay, well, first of all, the tells become one category. Remember, there's a hand dealt usually every minute. That's the other thing. It's like a life every minute, a new experience. So when the poker player sees his cards or her cards, okay, that the only information they have is these two cards and the people around them. They are going to start out by making decisions basically pretty much just on how strong their cards are, um, based on statistical variance. But as the game goes on and they see other people making plays and raises and how they whether or not they can get pushed off a hand by making a re-raise, they're going to start learning their opponents. And so then you start not only looking at your own cards and the probability of what will happen with those cards, but you're also thinking about the probability of what will happen based on what you know about the other people and also where you sit at the table. Because, for instance, if you're the first person to act out of, let's say, 8 people, what information do you have? You just have your own hand, right? But let's say you're the last person to act. Well, now you know what every other person at the table has done. So we call this a backdoor game. In other words, in poker, most of the real action is near the end of the chain. Most people are not going to start out unless they got a really strong hand betting because it's too early. They don't have enough information. But by the time you're the last person to bet, now you've got a very good amount of information about the other people. So that makes a difference as well.
Yeah. And what's the biggest mistake that people make when trying to be rational under the pressure? How does poker expose that?
Um, we have it. It's called going on tilt, TILT. Just imagine if you were on a balance beam, okay, and all of a sudden, what's the name of the gymnastics they have before the willies or something? All of a sudden, you do something you shouldn't have done. You screw up a routine, okay? And instead of just forgetting about it and going back and doing it again, you're still thinking about it, and it starts to get into it really gets into you deep, and so you can't forget it, and it affects your play. The true professional, it happens, you move on because you understand that there are always going to be situations where you are going to get a bad beat. A bad beat means you should have won, but somebody got a miracle card to beat you. Um, and people that can't get over that, they tend to just throw their money away because then they want to get back. They're angry. They're not having any control, and you see this in traffic jams. I mean, typical. I don't know how bad it is in Australia, but the we have situations in my hometown where people will have a situation where they're caught in traffic, and you can just see them after they get out of the traffic. They drive like wild people because they're so mad, and if they get caught in another traffic jam, you get road rage. They have no control over themselves. Poker is a game of mind control, self control. Okay, if you can't be patient, you have to wait for the right cards. You have to wait for the right circumstances, and you have to be prepared to accept loss as part of the game, even losses that don't seem fair. As a matter of fact, poker is one of the few games where A, lying is acceptable, and B, bad behavior is sometimes rewarded. So, in other words, a person that goes in with a really bad hand and shouldn't gets lucky cards and they win. That's the nature of the game. And by the way, that's the reason why poker is not like chess. See, with chess, it's really 99 or more percent skill. About the only chance there is in chess is whether you go white or black, whether you get the first move or not. But in poker, luck is a big factor. So everybody thinks they can play because they figure, well, I won once, and certainly at any one time, I can tell you this: give me the best poker player in the world, whoever that might be. You take some consensus, okay? Maybe Phil Hellmuth or Daniel Negreanu or somebody, and put me against them head to head, okay? If I get lucky, I'm going to beat them. I Lucky is better than good in poker, but not in the long run. If I played them over 10 years, they'd have all my money.
Yeah, it sounds to me like that for better or for worse, poker is very much like life in the sense of you may get lucky once, but in the long run, you can't keep getting lucky. And sometimes you may face unlucky losses and you have to accept them and move on, otherwise you would be stuck in a rut of self-pity. I have fallen victim to that on occasion when trams in our city break down and I have to walk a considerable distance to get to the next tram stop. So that has happened. So it sounds to me a lot like, yeah, that playing poker can teach you so much about life, interestingly. If
Well,
someone
I
wanted,
like your comment. Let me interrupt because you made a really good
yeah,
point there.
please do.
Uh, Now, when you said that, that it, when luck goes bad, that if you let it affect you, it might change your whole direction of your life. That is so critical to realize that, to accept the fact that luck, it goes both ways. I mean, you can have good luck, you can have bad luck, but it also evens the playing field. And if you just recognize that, sometimes what you think is bad luck is good luck. I remember, one man, classic example, was trying to get on an airplane, missed his connection, couldn't get on it, plane crashed. Well, it was bad luck he didn't get on the plane. It was good luck when the plane crashed and everybody died. So you never know. I mean, the world is full of these lucky things going on and off. But you make a good point there. If you can just accept luck as being part of the game, it's a built-in random number generator. Sometimes it's going to work for you. Sometimes it's going to work against you. What you don't want to do is get stuck and start getting into a situation where you go on tilt, and you just give up because, oh, I'll never make it, just because this one bad thing happens to you. So that's it's like
Yeah. So if someone wanted to improve their decision making, or patience, or just general ability to observe people and their nonverbal cues, what would you recommend with playing poker? Would you recommend doing it over a long term, trying it out for a bit? Yeah. What do you think?
I think poker, like any other job, if you're looking at it as a profession, something you want to do is to earn money, not just to have recreational fun. Um, I think you need to study it. You need to learn about it. There are some really good books out there. Nothing beats experience. There are free sites that one can play at, so you don't have to lose your money to find out how to play. Uh, but it's I think in all professions you see that the one thing I think that makes the difference is you have to have some level of capacity to do the job, obviously. But if you have passion for what you're doing, if you really want it, and you have the minimal skills necessary, I choose the person with passion over the skills any day, because that's going to be the person that's literally addicted to it. And I one of the best ambassadors of poker. His name was Mike Sexton. Unfortunately, he passed away recently, but he said, if you don't love poker, you'll never be able to. No matter how much money you make, it's not worth playing because it's just too hard. It's too many hours. You've got to love it. And I think the same is true of a relationship. Um, if you have a passion for that other person, if you're willing to put into the relationship, you're going to get out of the relationship, not out of it badly. You're going to get something out of it. If now, on the other hand, if you got one person putting in all the effort and the other person just taking it and absorbing it, that relationship's probably going to end up bad.
Yeah,
Because we
yeah,
all
that
want it. We want balance. We want our fair share. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I can think of so many professions where that is just all the more true. Especially the ones with really, really long working hours in not great conditions. Chef, nurse, for example, doctors. Yeah, the passion there is so integral to how you feel about the job, right? So thank you so much for sharing all of that with us. It's been really enlightening, and yeah, I myself am pretty inspired to give it a go at playing poker, not in the casino, of course, and just being a bit more observant, I suppose, of certain tells that people have. So now I think would be a great time to go into the practices and habits segment. And that's where we'll talk more on the day to day application of what you've just shared with us. So I'd love for you to share a habit that you recommend practicing when it comes to gambling or any kind of high stakes decision making.
Okay. First thing is situational awareness. This is what we call emotional intelligence. We used to think there was only two kinds of intelligence. There was the computer storage kind, and then there was the creative kind that could use them in new ways. But there's this third way. Some people call it street smart. It's people who are aware of their surroundings. They're not just moving through the streets totally oblivious. So being situationally aware is knowing where you are and what's going on around you, and you're keenly taking in the information. And it's not just taking it in, it's processing it. So there's a difference between, let's say, looking and actually observing. Because a lot of times we see there, yeah, I'll give you an example. You meet somebody and they give you their name, and you're 5 seconds later, you don't remember their name because you weren't really, you were listening, but you were not hearing. You got to process the information. You got to say, okay, that guy's name is Marty. Uh, that's a hard name to remember. Okay, I'll connect it with this is a party. So I met Marty at the party. So the next time you meet Marty at the party or wherever else he is, you might have a better chance to remember his name. But so many people are oblivious. Um, uh, by the way, cell phones are probably one of the most dangerous tools of what I call the foe of situational awareness. You get these kids crossing the streets, driving in cars, not just kids, adults, and they're scrolling along, and the next thing you know, they're a little ornament on the front of a bus. You know,
Yeah, what happened to people watching, right?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I might be showing my age here, but I agree with you there. Like noise canceling headphones are such a huge thing right now, and I totally understand the appeal with like getting better sound quality, not having to hear all the background noise. But I generally can't like function outside without hearing the background noise. Like, what if a train is coming my way and I have no idea, or a car is coming my way, right? But I'm curious to know, what are the biggest challenges that you think people face when in terms of situational awareness and emotional intelligence?
Well, it takes work. It takes a conscious effort on the person's part to not just passively receive information, but to actively process it so that their mind can actually use it. Um, it's kind of like it's just like it's kind of like digesting food. There's some foods that just pass right through you, and they don't give you any nourishment. You need to nourish what you learn. You've got to take it, process it. Some of it is waste, get rid of it, but other stuff can be really valuable to you. And the more you do it, the more you'll become adept at doing it. It's like as a matter of fact, a lot of times when you look at these master criminals or these master FBI agents, which I've worked with, um, they are so attuned to their environment that I mean, they're looking for things that we wouldn't even think about, like where's that camera located, or is there a car across the street with two people in it that's missed it up a bit, so they must have been sitting there watching me. Things that most people that just blithely go on with their lives, never recognizing that there's all kinds of cues out there. They just have to be ready to receive them, and again, process them.
Yeah. So, is there a habit or an exercise at all that you'd recommend practicing to train our situational awareness?
Yes, I would practice active listening, which is very difficult to do because I'm an extrovert. And like my wife said to me, she said, I've never finished a sentence with you. I always interrupt her. Active listening involves not only receiving the input of the individual, but waiting until they finish and then thinking through what they said before you respond. Um, Introverts are better at doing this than extroverts, but many people they don't have that skill, and it really takes patience, and because you can't be thinking about what you're going to tell them. You've got to listen to what they're telling you first, and a lot of us don't do that. I'm already 2 or 3 steps ahead, trying to figure out what I'm going to do here, or else my mind's on something else, and I'm not even listening to the person.
Yeah, I have a few friends myself who do that, and I've kind of just like, I've kind of just called them interrupting. What I don't want to say the nickname because it's going to sound bad, but whatever the favorite animal is. So one of my friends, her favorite animal is a cow, and I just call her an interrupting cow, and she goes like, "Moo." It's a whole inside joke. It doesn't need to be understood, but yeah, like a lot of people
Well,
do it, like just
you milk it for all it was worth.
so, yeah. Oh, that's a good one. But yeah, just like yeah, a lot of people do it just out of excitement, really. That's what you extroverts do, isn't it? Like you get so excited.
Well, yeah, and it's just it's just that. Remember, I said in poker you have to be patient and wait for the right hands. A lot of people, they can't do that. They bet substandard hands to start with. Well, once you do that, you're already taking a big risk because there's 9 other people at the table that probably have better starting cards than you do. So it's just that's why I would say situational awareness, active listening, which is part of that, um, learning to be patient, learning to have a passion, and very importantly, trying to correlate what you're doing with what you have a passion about. And one other thing I say, because I'm older, and I can say this because I never knew what it meant to be old until I was. I when I worked with pilots, I spent 20 years training airline pilots, and these pilots were very, very active. And at the time that I was training them, the retirement age was, I think, was 60 years old. And you'd hear about these people. 2 years later, they'd be dead. And you'd ask why. And the thing is, their sense of purpose was lost. They had no plans. It was like right up against a brick wall. And so as you get older, I think it's important that if you, like, for instance, let's say you want to retire at, let's say, 65 or 70, um, you should be thinking about that. You might have 20 to 30 years of life left over. What are you going to do? What do you want to do? Maybe you should do like I do. I have what I call pine box retirement, which means I don't want to quit working until I die. Why? Because it gives me a sense of purpose and it also pays me. Like with my poker, they always joke about the fact I make my contributions to the community. And people say, "Are you playing poker full time?" And I say, "No, I'm keeping my day job because poker is. I'm not good enough at poker yet to be able to say I can make a living off of it. Definitely. Um, so I love my job. I love working with students. I've been working 60 years as a professor, and people say, "Aren't you tired of this?" I said, "No, no, I like it." You know, um, just like, I mean, I know that just like you see these older married couples, 50, 60-year old, they're holding hands. I don't even see younger couples doing that anymore because they've got that sense of passion, you know, caring,
Yeah, that is
caring.
so true. Oh my gosh. This reminds me of this time that I remember how I told you I went to Vietnam early in the episode. And we had a
Yeah,
tour
you
guide
visited the
for
tunnels, right? You
yeah,
actually went in the
visited the
tunnel, yeah.
tunnels. Yeah, but we had a tour guide, and so my partner and I were holding hands, which apparently is an anomaly in Vietnam, especially with older couples. And the tour guide was like, "Oh, you guys must be a new couple, not married yet, because if you look outside and you look at all the married couples, they're not holding hands. They don't hold it. It's 1 year of holding hands, and that's it, and no more." Yeah, but yeah, that's a very interesting point that you pointed out there. And I think it'll be a good time to go into open mic segment.
Just
What do
before
you
that, let
think?
me say one thing because you do bring up one other good point. There are cultural differences in nonverbal communication. For instance, if you watch a North American person dealing with a Latin American person, their sense of personal space, that little envelope of air around them, the North Americans want to keep a larger envelope, whereas the Latin Americans like to be much closer. So if you watch a Latin American and a North American talk, you'll see the Latin American move closer to the North American. That person will move back, the other will move forward. It's like a little dance up and down the halls. So in some cultures, you have to be careful because uh, a gesture like a finger extended might mean one thing in one country and something totally different in another country. So that's another kind of nonverbals that which is culturally tied together.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I also wonder, like, if the with the holding hand thing, like, I feel like part of it might be the heat and humidity. Like, it's really hot and uncomfortable to be physically touching all the time, right, in Southeast Asia. So that might also be a factor. But who's to say? Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us. It's been incredibly enlightening. I've really enjoyed this. Now, let's move on to the open mic segment. This will be your chance to talk about anything that you're passionate about, which could be poker, could be something else. It doesn't have to be related to the topic. So the floor is entirely yours. Take it away, Marv.
Well, is there anything that I've talked about or anything that you think any of your listeners would be interested in based on my experiences as a teacher, an author, a poker player, or a airline consultant? Those are the four things I've done in life.
Wow, that is very all encompassing career. I think I would love for you to share like any final pieces of advice about poker and applying that to daily life if you have them. Anything that you think that people need to know more about, any misconceptions about poker that you feel like need to be addressed.
Okay, I think I kind of summarized because some of these I might have talked about. Number one, it can be played recreationally for fun. You don't even need to use money, but money is a way make it a little more exciting. If you want to become a poker player, understand the odds are against you making it successful. If you do want to play, take your time. Don't start out, you know, playing in the biggest games. Work your way up. Do some reading. Do some free poker on the internet. Um, if you have a chance, go meet some like-minded friends. Talk over the hands that you played. Learn from each other. Good poker players often, when they go to the World Series, they'll share a house, and they'll be in the evening after they've played. They'll go over hands and they'll talk about why was this played this way or what should I have done that way. Um, don't expect it to be an easy living. Even if you are successful, they are long hours and they are not healthy hours. Also, one other thing I would warn you about, as a poker player, we talked about the importance of not tilting, of taking your losses and moving on. There's one other problem because most poker takes place in casinos. You have what are called leaks, Leaks. These are people that are good at poker, but they have leaks and they blow their money at other things that they can't win at. Like, for instance, they'll win $20,000 at poker and then go blow $50,000 at dice, which is a negative expectation game, and they're never going to win at it in the long run. Or maybe they become um, they, there's a lot of drugs, alcohol. There's a lot of encounters between people. You live it's usually a very fast life. You're going from one place to another if you're following the various poker tournaments. You're on the road a lot. It's very hard on your body. You're playing 12 hours a day. You only get 15-minute breaks. I mean, unless you know how to eat and go to the bathroom on time, you're going to have a lot of problems. These are all things that take from your body. And I've noticed that some of the younger poker players are actually into this whole area of good health. So they're really they're doing their proper exercise. They're taking the right nutrients. They're eating well. They're exercising. All the things they're supposed to be doing. Where most poker players, the old image of a poker player is like that. Guy smoking a stogie. Of course, you can't smoke now in poker rooms, but fat. And just is sitting there, just waiting for a heart attack.
Yeah. Well, I guess my last question for you before we wrap up this episode would be, what are your favorite things about poker?
The favorite thing about poker is that a new life begins every minute. In other words, I can be sitting at a poker table and for a whole hour not get one hand that I can play because the cards are just too bad. You just can't play them. And then a hand comes up, I get aces, two aces. That's the best starting hand you can get. And you never know. So the excitement of the game it's constantly repeating. You don't just stay there for 20, 30 minutes. I mean, it's happening and happening and happening. So for a person who wants action, um, it's a great game. And also for me as an extrovert, I learned this very hard during the pandemic because I played online poker for a while. I never had before. I hated it because a lot of the game for me is the social aspect of it. Um, I love the interaction between the people. And one other thing about I would say too, and I guess closing for me at least, the nice thing about poker is that it's a game of equality. If you go into a tournament, which is what's called a freeze out tournament, everybody starts with the same amount of money. You can be a billionaire, or you can have just enough money to put in $400 or whatever it is. But if you can't rebuy, everybody's equal because once you lose your money, you're out of the tournament. Um, and I've also noticed that when I go into a card room, every person in that card room is there for one reason. They want to take your money. Now think about two or 300 people gathered with that one purpose in mind, and there's usually very little violence or anger. We have all kinds of different cultures mixing, different religions, different different color of one's skins. But I don't. It's because everybody recognizes the color of money is equal, and that's what that's what it is. It's kind of like I just wish people lived like poker. It's neutral. It doesn't play favorites. You know,
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for shedding light on all of that. It's been just such an enlightening episode. If our listeners want to find out more about you and what you do, where can they go?
to the nearest poker room. No, the
Well,
I
I better see you there. I'll go to the nearest poker room right now in Australia. I
uh,
better see you there, Marv.
I've got on X. I'm the Duckman 22 is my call sign. I do I don't do that much social media anymore, but the it's I am a poker ambassador for my home casino, uh, and the reason I am, of course, I tell the people the reason I am is because I lose more money than anybody else. But it's because I love the people. It's like you remember the TV series Cheers, where
Nope.
everybody knows your name. That's so when you go in there, everybody knows me, and I'm really happy. And I try to make people when they sit down at the table, I welcome them. If they get a good hand, I say good hand. It satisfies an extrovert's need for social interaction. So but no, I would hope that anybody that sees this particular episode, if they ever are playing poker, I mean, I do play at the World Series, and or if they're ever in a poker room and they see me there, come up and say hi. I'd love to see them. Yeah, I love to
All
say
right.
hi. Yeah.
Well, excellent. We'll leave all of your information in the show notes below. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Thanks again, Marv, for joining us today. And we'll catch you in the next episode.
You've been a very wonderful host.
You've been listening to Wealth Pathways, the Affluence Science Insights Podcast produced by LMSL, the Life Management Science Labs. More episodes are available from 10 life management perspectives and can be found by searching LMSL on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and other podcasting apps available on your devices. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate, share, and subscribe to our channel so that other people can find it and we can continue to provide quality content. More of our work can be found on our website at affluence.lifemanagementsciencelabs.com, where you can join our movement. I'm Marie Stella. Thanks for tuning in.